Well, there is a way I could record for more than 15 minutes on YouTube, of course. But I decided against it because you need to put in a verification code. And I've done so many of those recently that the thought makes me panicky. Captures and God knows what, and notification codes that don't arrive, and being cut out, blocked from my own accounts. No. And 15 minutes is long enough for me to talk. Well, I ended the last video by saying that Ken Browning was one of the first to die, following my turning in a porn ring in which he was involved. I never will know to what degree he was involved. I was kind of warned off saying anything. A month before, Ken told me that this man, Peter Orr, wanted child pornography transferred from a cine film to video. When I say I was warned off, Ken took me to a house in Ferndown. There was a couple there with a Dutch or German surname, and I can't remember what it was. They had about 4 kids, and they also had boxes and boxes of pornography and sadomasochistic devices. I remember them showing me one. It was a sort of a clingy rubber head mask. And I don't know who would voluntarily put it over their heads. Because I had this thing in my hands, and I looked at it. And of course I had handcuffs as well. Once this is on your head and your hands are cuffed, you can't get it off. There were no holes for the nostrils, and there was no hole for the mouth. They made damn sure I took a good look at that thing. I don't know if they knew that things were falling apart at that time, because apparently they were already under investigation before I went to the police. In the end, they got a £2,000 fine. I knew this was 1988, I suppose, but no, 88. And all their materials confiscated, and they promptly restocked. For this, people died. I have described the death of Ken Browning on several previous videos. I'm reasonably certain I haven't uploaded them. He came to my flat. We were still on friendly terms, considering what he'd told me, and considering that I had turned him over to the police. I figured, well, at least he had a conscience, and he'd done the right thing. He came to my door, and it's true to say he could have died of a perfectly natural heart attack. He complained that he had chest pains. Actually, I was reluctant to let him in at first. And he came in and pacing up and down my sitting room for 2 hours. At which point my ex-husband appeared. And by then I was sufficiently worried. I said, can we drive Ken to the hospital? I couldn't figure out why he'd come to my place at all, because he lived very close to the hospital, whereas my place was a good 6 or 7 miles away, right across the other side of the city. I had the impression that there was something he wanted to tell me the whole time he was pacing. Anyway, my ex agreed to drive him to the hospital, but to cut a long story short, Ken collapsed in the car park. and I saw him fall. I had to go upstairs to my flat to phone an ambulance, which left Ken, who had fallen, I didn't know whether he was dead or not, with my ex. Anyway, when the ambulance came, they pronounced him dead. Well, they took one look at him and loaded him into the ambulance, went off without sirens and without flashing lights. And although I had niggling doubts, I've always had niggling doubts, I decided that he had died of a perfectly natural heart attack. His death certificate confuses me because his death certificate says that he died in the general hospital, whereas if he had died at my flat, that death certificate should have read DOA. It stands for dead on arrival. And if he was not dead at my flat or the car park outside my flat, why did the ambulance take off without its lights or sirens? That puzzles me. I'm always wary of taking off into Never Never Land, although I have done it before on these videos. There are drugs that will induce heart attacks. On the other hand, Ken was a man under stress. He was going to testify, presumably against the porn ring of which he was a part. He was in his late 50s. He was slightly overweight. He was a smoker. He was a prime candidate for a heart attack. His death is one of the deaths about which I am extremely suspicious, but even I cannot rule out a natural explanation. I do, however, consider it very convenient that he died shortly before he could testify.